of tube circuits and a lot of other stuff, because in those days everything was electron tubes. In fact, still is in certain areas, because they're the only things that will work when you're dealing with higher order energies.
Did he use a computer to drive it? Or
there were no computers then.
No computer hardware.
So the computer did not begin to take shape until 1946. So in the meantime, when he was satisfied, in October of 43, he became part of the atomic bomb project, and of course he spent a lot of time up there, but not full-time. He was there as a consultant. And in early 44, he made a suggestion to the Navy, well, I'd like to have Edward up there with me, and they loved the idea because it would bury me in the most remote, the most secret base in the United States, and nobody would know where I was, and I could not talk about what had happened on the Philadelphia project to the rest of the Navy. And the few people up there had such a high-level clearance, if they believed it, they would ignore it anyway.
Because they already knew about it.
Perhaps so. Because my research has shown that at least 2 Air Force officers knew all about it at the time it was going on for various reasons. A number of other Navy officers knew about it, some of whom are still alive, whose names I will not use until I have clearance. And there's a lot of evidence around yet which has escaped the notice of the wonderful Navy Office of Naval Intelligence and all of the other intelligence agencies that have made a very thorough job at searching stuff out. They've removed all of my school records. They've removed my military records. I'm sure they exist somewhere.
Talking about Bob Lazar's story of his...
Very much, very much. As a friend of mine living in Flagstaff, Arizona, who used to be on the White House staff for President Nixon, told me once when he became interested in my story and maybe trying to set up a system, a possible suit against the government, he says, I can tell you this much from my experience in the White House. He says, I'm not there anymore. I don't want any part of it. But he says, I could make one phone call for 25 cents in a pay phone and say, I want so-and-so's made a non-person. And within 1 week, all records would be gone. From Social Security to bank accounts to school records to employers' records, where he went to school, you name it. Driver's license, the whole 9 yards. All ID would be gone and he would be a complete non-person. He said that can happen in 1 week.
So basically they have this procedure established because they obviously have used it on numerous occasions. Dozens, if not hundreds of occasions.
Definitely, they've used it on dozens and hundreds of cases where for some reason they want to keep the victim alive instead of pulling the, as I think L. Ron Hubbard called it, the 2-45 instant theta clearing technique, which means 2 slugs from a 45. That's a very quick way of exiting the individual, but it has sometimes its own repercussions, and the military or the government does not wish to do this technique all the time. Undoubtedly, and without question, they've used it many times, but there are cases where they do not want to use it, for whatever their reasons. So in any case, I was at Los Alamos by von Neumann's suggestion from 44 to 47, July 44 to July 4th, 47. Then I was hustled out under trumped-up charges. Never faced a court-martial because they were trumped-up charges, and the Navy just wanted an excuse for the MPs to arrest me and get me out of there. And then I was given the 9 yards of brainwashing and gone...
When you say brainwashing, this means total deletion of your past memories, of your identity, of
everything. Everything.
Who were?
Everything.
Basically, they reformat your hard disk, and you lose everything.
They lost everything from it, memory of who I was, all of my history of schooling, everything I had done, that I was Edward Cameron was lost. And then they did the piece de resistance with alien technology help. They did an age regression number, which the government has the hardware for this, but normally does not take anyone to an age earlier than 21 because of the genetic side effects. And they decided they wanted to reduce me to the age of 1 and plug me in a new family, the Bielek family. It's a long story, and some people I know may have a great deal of difficulty in believing it, but I was sent back to 1927 as a 1-year-old kid, approximately, and plugged in the Bielek family after the kid there, who was the normal, real Al Bielek, and there's a birth certificate to prove it, allegedly died of some illness, and then I was put in as a substitute, and then of course...
But with your physical body, not as a walking of your soul into his body?
No. They originally intended to do something like that. But there was, shall we say, I was saved at the last minute by Dr. John von Neumann, who was totally upset about it and didn't want to see this happen for his own reasons. So I went back, and I was a young kid, about a 1-year-old, and grew up, and I didn't know anything. Other than I was just growing. I relived my entire life from yard one, scratch one.
Till you finally discovered your past connections with the Philadelphia experiment.
Right.
But tell us how the Philadelphia led to the Phoenix, I mean to the time tunnel. How did the idea for the tunnel appear? Who was the...
The idea for the tunnels actually was alien technology. We did not have the technology to do this. We had the technology to build a time machine, go either forward or past in time. But we had no technology at that time capable of producing a tunnel wherein a person or an object could be sent down this tunnel to another physical location on this planet or another part of this galaxy and also shift its time reference. This was exceedingly advanced technology which only the aliens knew how to do. And the Phoenix project was overrun with aliens.
So basically, what the Phoenix technology is ahead of the Philadelphia technology.
Much.
You don't need the hardware of the Star Trek ship orbiting around the planet to beam you up or down.
That's right.
You probably extend the distance of this travel tremendously comparable to the teleportation technology. And you can travel in time.
That's correct.
I don't know whether the teleportation technology can travel in time.
That I don't know. But the Phoenix project with their tunnels, as they finally got them to work properly, and it was a long process of a lot of work, all of which is detailed in a new book. That new book is, of course, the Montauk Project.
Fascinating book that we greatly recommend to anyone.
It's written by Preston Nichols, and he was part of the Phoenix Project in a major way, as was my brother Duncan. But he remembered after a period of time and his own electronic systems for restoring his own memory, all of the technical details of what he did, what projects were on, and it certainly does not cover all of the projects under the umbrella of the Phoenix Project because none of us remember everything yet, but enough to make a very viable book.
What you remember is fascinating.
That's right.
I remember walking out of your lecture, the first time I heard your lecture at the Pasadena Whole Life Expo, I had the feeling that the reality, that the world I was living in has ceased to exist for me, that the ground, that somebody pulled the ground from under my feet and that I was free falling into unknown space.
Yes, we did.
How strong was the impact of all this information upon me, despite the fact that for the last 10 years, all I've been doing every day is digging into paranormal, into metaphysical, into the ufological and other crazy marginal stuff.
Well, that stuff, as you call it, is nothing compared to what they did at Montauk and since. But basically the Montauk Project set the pace for everything that came afterwards and did things which I don't think have been replicated. Let's detail a little bit about what they did. They had time tunnels. They were able to go to Mars, as Duncan and I did, to go into the underground of Mars to explore the underground caverns and the vestiges of their civilization. Right, the vestiges of a dead civilization, which they knew existed, and they had all this evidence on the surface. We've had colonies on Mars since the 60s, late 60s. And
how big are these colonies? Any
I don't really know. I would have to guess and say there's at least 2 bubble cities there, and by now they probably don't need the bubbles because they do have an atmosphere on Mars of about 707 millibars, which is 7/10 that of Earth, and the temperature at the equator is about 40 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, which is adequate.
So basically a pair of jeans and a pullover would be good enough for jogging.
But when they first went there, they were convinced there was no oxygen, but there was suddenly, for some reason, oxygen released. That's a story I don't really know all the details over how that happened. But in any case, there are colonies on Mars, and they found monuments, like the famous face on Mars, the pyramids, and they knew there were entrances through them, and they could not break through because these were so huge and so heavy, they did not have earth-moving machinery of adequate scope to break into these things. So eventually they called back by radio to Earth and says, we got something up here. We know there's an underground here. We can't get into it. Have you guys on Earth got any suggestions? They said, yeah, we'll look into it. And they went to the people running Montauk, which basically was run out of Lincoln Labs, MIT, Massachusetts, by Dr. Herman C. Unterman, who was the project director, manager. And they decided that, well, yes, we can undoubtedly get into the underground of Mars, but they radioed back, we need some coordinates of the sections you wish to have explored.